Supportables, with week 15 coming to an end, that means the end of our regular season, which I will explain a little bit more when I get to the wrap up at the very, very end. But this was a big week. We had the fight for number one. We had a head-to-head matchup for third and fourth, and we had one person who could play spoiler and pull one of them out of the top four and get into the playoffs. I think a lot of us were paying attention a bit more this week, and so you already know the results, but let's do a quick recap with one little caveat. This week, I'm not going to do the big NFL kind of breakdown. Yes, there's a ton of stories, but I'll try and sprinkle in some of the stuff that happens in my wrap-ups, but realistically, it's fantasy week, and we got to get right to it. So this is what happened in week 15. In a match that meant everything to Jackie and for pride for Kelsey and Frankie, this one seemed over right off the get-go. Didn't really matter who Jackie played this week, I don't think, although putting up the low is not what you want on the week when you want to rally the troops. But wow, Kelsey and Frankie put out the biggest blowout of the year and one of the top scores. Not the top score. We did have one that was slightly higher. We'll get to that when we do like the league wrap up. So just take a look. I mean, obviously it's a foregone conclusion that if you have a score like that most of your players went off. We did see that Kelsey, her first round pick, does disappoint, and their kicker did kickery things, but everybody else was in double digits. And as we're going to see, didn't have some of the huge points. There was a lot of points available this week by a few players, and then obviously some massive disappointments. But you overachieved in both quarterbacks, even though neither got into the top five. Now, you did have the receiver one in Waddle, so great start there, because I know in other leagues I saw him on some benches. I think with Tyreek Hill going down, he got a lot more work. And Williams was our running back 5 this week. Even the defense was their defense 2. Other than that, everyone just put up a solid outfit. I believe you even still had a few options on your bench. Sam Laporta was by far the tight end. One had a monster week with 3 touchdowns. You probably saw that. That was an early in the week kind of situation, so maybe you were bummed on that one, but didn't really matter for you. And actually, you also had Cooper, which was our wide receiver 5 on your bench. So as bad as this was, it actually could have been worse. Jackie, I don't know what to say. Unfortunately, you did make some savvy moves. New Orleans picking up their defense. They were our defense 4 this week, so that was quite important to you. But it's the same old story. I think Wilson is slightly overachieving. Mahomes is underachieving, but if you actually did watch that game, he played fine. No one in this league has taken Kadarius Toney. He's the receiver that caused all the issue the week before or 2 weeks ago when he was offside. No, that was last week. Wow, time has flying. Not only is he occasionally offside for the most epic play of the year, but he's also got a knack for tossing up the ball to the other team. He actually batted a ball to the side and it was intercepted, so he cost you points just by being on the field. Your receivers didn't show up for you, sadly. And I mean, Bijan Robinson, it's shocking. I've already gone on my Atlanta rant. I will likely go on again in the year-end wrap-up, but to barely give Bijan any carries in a game that you needed to win if you're Atlanta, this has got to be frustrating for you. Your kicker got shut out. Your tight end got shut out. Just it was a storm of unfortunate situations. Now, Gus the Bus and Singletary could have been good starts for you, as was Higgins. You definitely could have beaten some teams in the league had they been in. But having a 0 on your tight end, a 0 on your defense, 0 on your kicker, and just coming up against Kelsey, it is always a shame when your team finally gets it and it seems in a groove. And Kelsey and Frankie's team have been on a run this week. Sadly, as we know, they didn't quite make the playoffs, and sadly for you, Jackie, neither did you. So you're both on the consolation side, but at least Kelsey and Frankie, you've got tons of momentum, and Jackie, you can still prove that your early start was not a fluke by having a good run in the consolation, but we'll get to that later. We knew this matchup was supposed to be epic, and it kind of was. Maybe not as high pressure, because by the time we got to mid-Sunday, I think most people understood that both of you were going to get in. So this could have been even more intense, but it did come down to the Monday Nighter, and Jules and Laria did just fall a little bit short, but this was still a good way to put yourself in a reasonable standing. So you didn't quite bomb the week. You still put up a great fight, but unfortunately, for you, you felt a little bit shy of Team Kickass, who is I believe, on our highest hot streak right now, and is doing quite well, obviously, to put themselves in the top 3 and actually solidify their playoff spot. So congratulations, Team Kickass. How'd you do it? I mean, Goff was a huge one for you. He was our quarterback 2, threw for 5 touchdowns, and was our quarterback 2. So someone else is coming up ahead. And Tucker, you had the only kicker in the top 5, but he was only our kicker 4. A lot of kicking points were left on the bench. Everyone else did just enough. I mean, you've pretty much been here on your wide receivers, and they did okay, but they certainly didn't blow the doors off this week. So it was really just a kind of solid effort for pretty much everybody but Breece Hall. You did leave a few points on the bench. You would have had a better defense out there, and Evans would have been a nice start for you at the wide receiver spot, but wouldn't look back in anger on this one. You did just fine. Jules, Lara, I mean, you actually had a down week for most of your players, which was unfortunate, except for McCaffrey, who was a freaking tank. Was unbelievable coming out. Essentially, he put up one of the best wide receiver performances as a running back, and then also ran for 2 touchdowns, which was and 115, which is pretty epic. In fact, he was so open on one of the plays that he caught a touchdown for. He caught it, fell over, was slow to get up, and then limped his way into that. Not limped, rolled his way essentially into the end zone. If you want to look up the highlight, it's pretty entertaining. So he was obviously our running back one. In terms of everybody else, you really just needed 1 or 2 more people to go off. Like Sam Fran, obviously producing a double digits in the defense is fine, but if one of your wide receivers or even your quarterbacks, if Dax could do what Dax normally does, you would have snuck this one out and you would have been the number 3 seed. Of course, you just would flip-flop, and all that really matters is who you play next round. You also had some issues. I mean, with Olave going out at the last minute, you did catch it. I did notice that was a late move there, so well done. I was a little worried that you'd have a blank going out, so you did put somebody in. Don't know if that's the person you really wanted out there in a game that you had to win it, but at least he's sitting out this week, and maybe next week when we're in the playoffs, he can help you out. So you two are definitely in the top 4, so you know what that means. We'll be getting to you when I look at our playoff matchups. So congrats, Team Kickass. You finished on an amazing note. This is the kind of performance that's going to give you confidence heading into next week. Jules, Lara, don't lose the confidence. You've had a great season, obviously, and now it just changes who you play next week. I will not spend a lot of time on my matchup, not just because it's my and Paul's matchup, but because we play each other next week in the consolation. And it was fine. I was happy, loved it okay. Allen doesn't throw the ball anymore, but apparently runs it. Cool. Gibbs was a running back 3 this week, so that was pretty good. Devontae was just outside of the top 5, but he had a good week for Paul. Purdy threw for 4 touchdowns and was our 3rd overall quarterback, but obviously Tua couldn't do it for him. So yeah, we both have to feel pretty good about it. We play each other again next week in the consolation semi. So Paul, I'll see you again next week, bud. Saving this for last for 2 particular reasons. Number 1, this was our battle for first place. So apparently you've been hanging on to it for the majority of the year. Once you got it early, you just kind of you weren't ready to let it go. Unfortunately, in this case, you did fall a little bit short. Hill giving you the 0 and you're not catching that. It was really a game time decision right at the very end. A little controversial because people saw him walking and jumping around on the sideline. So people are wondering maybe why he didn't go out there. Some people assume that he just felt he wasn't needed against the Jets, but he's supposed to be back next week. Some are saying that actually just part of his problem is he's so quick and he can accelerate so quickly that if he doesn't feel 100%, he just doesn't want to put himself in a spot where a massive injury can happen. Now, would he have scored 30 and you could have won? Most receivers, you'd say no, but Tyreek Hill, I mean, maybe he might be enough to put you over. That's not to take away what Raph and James did. They put up the 2nd highest score for the week. Hurts and Browning both had good performances. Hurts was our quarterback 5. You can see Browning was just behind. So some of the injury concern I mentioned from this team, they've obviously bounced back. St. Brown had an awesome game. He was not in our top 5, but I have him in other leagues, and it was wonderful that he's finally putting up bigger numbers. But I think that's just a product of the fact they scored 42. So I don't know if that's something you can bank on next week. Speaking of which, though, Cook, as someone who had Allen at the quarterback, Buffalo has decided against Dallas they were just going to dominate and run. So Cook definitely did that. He was our running back 2. So there you go. I think you're probably looking for a little more in your defense, but hopefully next week I think you're gaming that Dallas can bounce back, and they certainly have a more favorable matchup. But Emily, you're still doing fine. I mean, with Tyreek coming back, you actually had our quarterback 1. Baker Mayfield had by far his best performance of the year. Lawrence did just fine, obviously, but I think your other person who went above and beyond at tight end was Njoku. He was our tight end 2, and in most weeks, 22 points would make him our tight end 1. You got to be happy that Jefferson actually made it back, had a full game under his belt. It's been a while since that happened. And so you did also have Kupp, who's finally healthy and was our wide receiver 4. So there's a chance that you're coming off the break here, that your team is back to full health, that you can put out your full wide receiver roster. And who knows, maybe just the 2nd seed, you just, like I said, all it changes is who you play, which is what I want to get to as we look into the playoff rounds. As we can see with week 15, it has come to an end. We're on to week 16. It already shoots us into the playoffs. So if you look at down here, this is our 1 through 4 championship side. Now, we are not the kind of pool that's put any money or anything on the consolation side. I still like it though. There is a consolation bracket, so don't worry if you're worried that you're going to have a Christmas without fantasy football. No, that's not the case. You actually do get to start your rosters. I do understand, though, if the 5 through 8 don't take it quite as seriously. Paul, I don't know if you can actually take it less seriously than you already do. But Kelsey, Frankie, this would be a huge feather in your cap. Jackie, I actually, to finish would just show that little mid bump, that little issue you had in the middle of the season was just a fluke and you can come back. And I'm just stubborn and want to win. So I will be at least putting it together a roster and still doing ads and drops, which I trust some other people will as well. But most of our attention does go onto the championship side. However, for this week, I am going to take a quick look and a quick peek at each of the matchups going forward. I will start with the consolation side. The funny part of the schedule is both consolation matchups are just a repeat of what happened last week. So realistically, I don't have to go into a lot of detail about this because we just saw these performances. Now, however, you do get to go back and try and guess here. So Jackie, you do have some people on the bench that outscored your roster. But as we know, predictions are just projections. We don't really know what's going to happen. Now, Yahoo suggests a slight favor here. I think the uncertainty with Hill and Waddle obviously got a lot more work with Hill out. I think Stafford against a not so great defense in New Orleans, and Minshew against a very scoreable defense in Atlanta probably helps out. I think also here Williams having a great late season push since his injury. Now the only issue we probably have here is Miami and Dallas. Not sure with Dallas which Dallas team's going to show up, but I guess we'll see from there. For Jackie, for you, it's really just, are you going to get a chance? You had both running backs who just didn't get a lot of carries, whether it's game script in terms of Pittsburgh, where they were behind a little bit and they don't tend to use Najee Harris as much when they're behind, or Bijan, who just is on a team that sometimes gives them 25 touches and sometimes gives them 5, and I don't think anyone in the world knows, not even the head coach probably knows before he does it. So how you're going to roll with that is kind of up to you. I would imagine some adds and drops here. So let's see, is this going to be a repeat of last week, in which case Kelsey gets off to an early start and Jackie just never has a shot? Or is it redemption time for Jackie? I guess we'll see. Same, just different. In the other side of the consolation, we have a rematch of Paul and I. Paul had kind of a meh week last week and was the second low scorer. For me, I was fine, but I think that was very matchup dependent. So as we move forward, Purdy continues his campaign for an actual MVP in the real league. We'll see if Chase is healthy or if Diggs is used a little bit more. But I think for our matchup, it'll be down to the same. I would imagine Paul's keeping it same. So I don't even need to look at his bench to see who we might put in, although maybe he'll get a little spicier over the holidays. For me, I do have some options. I have people coming off the IR and tons of people on the roster. Some I will use and some obviously I will not. But we'll see how we go. I expect this one to actually be pretty close because Paul has 1 week where he scores like this and the next week he goes up. So yes, he's had a bad last couple weeks, but it wouldn't shock me if Paul just did this just to spite me and put me in the 7-8 game. So only time will tell. I guess we'll see on Christmas. On our championship side, this one's going to be intense. We have the newly crowned winner of the regular season in Raph and James against the slightly disappointed last year. But if you look at the arc of the entire season, Jules Laura, I remember a lot of people were making fun of you after the draft. They thought it was being too nice to your drafted team. And I said, actually, some of the guys you took have a high ceiling, a couple moves here, a couple moves there. And next thing you know, here you are. I wouldn't worry too much about the projecteds because we're going to have some people moving in and out, especially with Raph and James. I know Stroud may or may not be in right now. Right now, obviously, Yahoo suggests he will be. But obviously, a lot of things could go up and down here. He's got some running backs here that one had a massive performance. One is a backup technically, so how's that going to work? And neither are really coming into play in terms of Yahoo predicteds. But they have a history in the last few weeks of putting up massive scores, including someone like St. Brown, who has had the up and down week, but is on a fairly decent high right now, and Hurts with a phenomenal matchup against the Giants because A, Philly actually needs to win, and B, the Giants are no bueno, and the Phillies got him at home, so that should bode well. Jules and Lara, on your side, I mean, Dax and Fields let you down last week, and that's very matchup based, so this is going to be super interesting because Dallas traditionally doesn't play great on the road, but it's a kind of a game that they have to win. They're the number 2 seed in the NFC, so we'll see what happens. Fields can go up and down, but Arizona is a phenomenal matchup for him, so that's a great week. McCaffrey is matchup independent. It doesn't matter. Realistically for you, it looks like you've got people like White, like TJ, McCaffrey, obviously, who've overperform for you on weeks. If you're going to be successful, that's where it's going to come from. Do you want to make any other moves? Do you want to tweak a little bit? Only time will tell. You both have some of the higher scoring defenses, but both on tough matchups, right? Dallas and Miami. Obviously, Miami's a very high scoring team. Are they the right choice this week? San Francisco and Baltimore. Baltimore can make things a lot very difficult with the running quarterback. Now, you do have options on your bench that you might be considering. So let's see how it pans out. Olave is meant to come back. HN, always someone who can throw a wrench in it. So let's see how it goes. So obviously, both of you are going to be paying attention to some waiver wire actions. I would expect this projected to be quite close. Let's see who takes it. You gotta love when Yahoo says 50-50 because they really don't know. And in this particular matchup, I'm gonna say we really won't know until Thursday or Saturday or Sunday, right at the very end, right? We've got a lot of injury issues. Pamela's been struggling with that with her wide receivers. Is Hill coming back? Is Jefferson still gonna be healthy? That one I think we know the answer to. On her bench right now is Cup. Is Cup gonna come back and have another strong performance? Is that just the beginning to what he's normally able to do? And I think as we look for Team Kickass, they've been on a hot run. Now, they do have some running back issues, and Jacobs was hurt last week, so he'll be a possibility. As of now, he's healthy. Evans is always someone who can be consistent, and obviously last week Tampa Bay went off, but that's not an every week thing, so we'll see how it kind of goes down. So this one will be really interesting. I do expect the predicteds to be quite close, and realistically, this is the kind of matchup where if Goff and Jackson and CD and Debo especially can have those like monster performances, then I think Team Kickass might be too much to climb. But it's on the same side. If Pamela has her wide receivers, if you have Hill, Jefferson, and potentially Cup, or whoever else you decide to put on, Swift has done well for you as well, or Barkley, if you have your big studs come out and put up a big fight, this one might just come down to who punches the hardest. Maybe not everybody scoring on the team. But honestly, at this point in the NFL, who's to say? All right, after looking ahead to next week's matchups, like I said, if you don't understand some of the playoff premise, please ask on the chat group. But consolation and championship do act separately now, so it just gives us a 1 through 8 ranking. Like I said, not everyone's going to be paying as much attention to the consolation side. There's no real intrinsic value. It's just the motivation of getting the wins over people that you know and finishing a bit higher in the league. We could attach something to it, but that's something we haven't discussed yet. So we'll put that to vote maybe for later on. But now we know our top 4. We know our matchups, and if you've been paying attention at all this year, which I know a lot of you have, or pretty much everyone has, the matchups matter more than anything else. So please pay attention. Hit the waiver wire if you want it. Make adds and drops. Pay attention to another funky schedule. If you're not aware as to why the college football program in the U.S. takes over Saturdays, but right now they're on a bowl season, so they do irregular kind of matchups. That's why Saturday they've been loading it through. They also decided since Monday is Christmas and they just want people to not enjoy time with their families, they put an extra game again on Monday. So there's actually a couple games on Monday. There's a couple games on Saturday, the one game on Thursday, and then Christmas Eve will bring us most of the games on Sunday. So take a look and make sure you're asking any questions that you have, but best of luck to everyone. One caveat ahead of time, this is our last week where we do the drinks. So after this week, the drinks are now over. Playoffs don't count for that. But we have another controversial one. I didn't hear a whole lot of a controversial talk. Raph and James seemed to accept their fate last week, and we have a similar situation where the bottom 2 scores were Jax and then Paul, and both of them have already been burnt, so we already go past them. So our third lowest score is actually the person who's going to owe drinks, and the only shame of it is it's a double kick for you, Pamela, because not only did you lose your number 1 spot, but you almost made it through the entire year without having to buy drinks, meaning, if I'm not mistaken, everybody had to buy at some point. I'm going to update that chart, and I'll send it on the group chat just to make sure, but just to be clear, as of now, the drinks are now done. So now we just have to catch up by actually drinking them. Next week, there'll be no more assigned. Just if you lose in the playoffs, I feel like that's bad enough. You don't need to be kicked again and have to buy another round. Plus, we have tons of rounds to share, both maybe some over the holidays, but most, I imagine, in January. Anyway, super exciting. Best of luck to everyone in the playoffs. I know it's at a really awkward time. It doesn't always hit on a Christmas, but we're looking at Christmas Eve being on the Sunday, Christmas on the Monday. Are you going to find the time to pay attention to fantasy? Come on. What else you got better to do? Anyway, best of luck to everyone, especially those in the top 4. Well done for making the playoffs.